It was the last day of 1944. The world had already endured 5 relentless years of war, but on that cold December morning, another mission was about to test the limits of human courage, endurance, and fate itself. Over the gray skies of northern Germany, the U.S. 8th Air Force prepared to strike one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe, Hamburg's oil refineries. From these facilities flowed the fuel that kept Hitler's war machine alive. And to stop it, young American men in their early 20s were willing to fly through hell. Among them was the crew of a B-17 Flying Fortress called the Little Skipper, piloted by Second Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, with his co-pilot Second Lieutenant William Leek by his side. The mission sounded straightforward on paper: fly deep into German territory, drop their bombs, and return home. But the men of the 100th Bomb Group, known as the Bloody Hundredth for their heavy casualties, knew that the odds were never in their favor. The morning began like countless others. Briefings at dawn, engines roaring to life across the frosty airfields of England, and the thunder of hundreds of bombers lifting off in formation. Above the channel, the sky was already thick with the silver glint of aircraft. Each B-17 carried 10 men, 10 lives dependent on each other, each mission a gamble between life and death. Their destination, Hamburg. The city had already been devastated earlier in the war, but German refineries were rebuilt and protected by one of the most formidable flak defenses in Europe. Everyone knew this would not be an easy flight. As the Little Skipper reached German airspace, the crew tightened their oxygen masks and prepared for what they called the dance of steel. The first burst of black smoke appeared below, then hundreds more as German anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with exploding shells. The formation trembled with turbulence. Each explosion was a thunderclap that rattled metal and nerves alike. For miles, the sky over Hamburg looked like a storm of fire. Planes began to go down. From Rojohn's cockpit, it looked like a scene from another world. Flaming fortresses tumbling earthward, parachutes opening like fragile white flowers against a field of smoke. But there was no time to think. The flak was so dense it seemed impossible for anything to survive it. Yet somehow, Rojohn kept the Little Skipper steady as they reached the target zone. Below them, the docks and refineries came into view through breaks in the cloud cover. The bombardier released the payload. Dozens of 500-pound bombs tumbled out, falling in a long, glittering line before erupting across the industrial district. The earth shook, and pillars of flame rose to the sky. Mission complete, but the danger was far from over. Turning for home meant flying back through the same cauldron of flak, and this time the Germans were ready. As the formation regrouped, the horizon filled with enemy fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Focke-Wulf 190s, and the terrifying new Me-262 jet fighters. The Luftwaffe was throwing everything it had left into the skies. The air erupted into chaos, machine guns rattled, tracers streaked across the cold air, and metal screamed as rounds tore through the bomber's aluminum skin. Crews fought desperately, firing their .50 caliber guns in every direction. One by one, the flying fortresses were hit. Faithful forever, flying off Rojohn's right wing, was struck by cannon fire and began to spiral down. In moments, the sky that had been filled with dozens of aircraft was now a broken formation of scattered survivors. Just as things seemed hopeless, the unmistakable silhouettes of American P-51 Mustangs appeared overhead. The long-range escorts dove into the fight, scattering the German attackers. For a brief moment, hope returned. But that hope didn't last long. The P-51s, running low on fuel, had to peel off to defend another formation farther north, leaving Rojohn's group alone once again. The remaining bombers pressed westward, battered and bruised, engines smoking, controls sluggish. The coast of Germany was in sight, the North Sea beyond it, a line between life and death. Then, as they crossed over the shoreline, the flak started again. It seemed endless. The explosions below rocked the bombers so violently that maintaining formation became nearly impossible. The wind over the sea was harsh, the turbulence fierce. Rojohn fought to keep the little skipper level, his hands numb, his arms aching from the constant strain. He had no idea that fate was about to deliver one of the strangest and most incredible moments in aviation history. Ahead of him, another B-17, known as Nine Lives, had taken heavy damage. Its engine sputtered, but the aircraft continued to fly. Unbeknownst to anyone, both of its pilots were already dead, killed instantly by gunfire through the cockpit. Yet their bodies, slumped forward, had locked the controls just enough to keep the plane flying straight but climbing ever so slightly upward. The rest of the crew, unaware of the tragedy up front, continued fighting to defend their ship. As the little skipper moved to close the formation gap left by another bomber that had gone down, Rojohn's aircraft approached from below and behind Nine Lives. In the turbulent air, with reduced visibility and almost no margin for error, the two bombers drew closer and closer until, suddenly, metal met metal. The impact was like an explosion. The upper bomber's ball turret smashed through the fuselage of the little skipper, and the lower plane's dorsal fin tore into the belly of Nine Lives. The two four-engine giants were now locked together, trapped in a deadly embrace high above the freezing sea. The force of the collision ripped apart control surfaces and scattered debris across the sky. For a moment, both aircraft seemed frozen in place. Then, incredibly, they stabilized. In that instant, the world must have felt unreal for Rojohn and his crew. Instead of falling, they were still flying. One B-17 was literally sitting atop the other. The propellers of the upper plane still spinning. The one engine was on fire. From the ground, it must have looked like a monstrous 8-engine hybrid, an impossible creation hanging in the winter sky. But inside, chaos reigned. The men in the little skipper could hear the creaks of twisted metal and the roar of burning fuel. Every second could be their last. Rojohn and Leek fought the controls, trying everything to separate the planes, but nothing worked. The two bombers were fused together by bent steel and sheer force. They had become one, a doomed machine with 16 trapped souls aboard. Smoke filled the cockpit. The left wing of the little skipper was burning, and heat began to seep through the aluminum walls. It was only a matter of time before the flames reached the fuel tanks. Rojohn realized that the only chance for survival was to somehow steer the twin wreck back over land. Crashing into the icy North Sea meant instant death. With both pilots straining on the controls, they managed to coax the lumbering mass into a gradual turn toward the German coast. It was an extraordinary feat of airmanship, the kind of flying that defied reason and physics. Slowly, agonizingly, the strange double bomber turned inland. Below, German soldiers stationed along the coast stared upward in disbelief. Many refused to fire. What they saw was not an enemy anymore. It was a pair of dying birds locked together, fighting gravity itself. Some even lowered their guns, realizing the men inside had no hope. Inside the little skipper, the fire spread. Ammunition began to cook off, sending deadly rounds bouncing around the fuselage. The heat was unbearable. One by one, crew members made the decision to bail out. They fought their way toward the rear hatch, the only exit not blocked by flames, but one man could not be saved. The ball turret gunner, trapped beneath the wreckage, was pinned with no escape route. His comrades tried to free him, but the twisted metal wouldn't budge. They knew he would perish there, and there was nothing more they could do. As more crewmen leapt from the tail into the bitter cold, the two pilots stayed at the controls. They were the last ones left. The ground was rising fast. Both men could have jumped, but neither did. They fought to hold the hybrid bomber steady, to give their crew every last second to escape. And then, when it was too late to jump, they held their breath. The double aircraft struck the earth with unimaginable force. The upper plane, Nine Lives, exploded on impact, its wreckage launching the little skipper forward like a skipping stone. The lower bomber slammed back down, its wings tearing through a wooden structure before coming to rest in a shattered field. Then came silence. Smoke curled into the cold air, and for the first time in what felt like eternity, everything was still. Miraculously, both pilots survived. Glenn Rojohn and William Leek crawled from the wreckage, bloodied but alive. They had done the impossible, flown two planes locked together, turned them around over enemy territory, and crash-landed in a way that gave their crew a chance to live. Out of 20 men aboard both bombers, 10 survived. Against all odds, half of them made it home. Captured by German soldiers, Rojohn and Leek were treated with a mix of shock and respect. even their enemies recognized what they had accomplished. They would spend the remainder of the war as prisoners, but they had already achieved something that would be remembered for generations. A testament to courage, teamwork, and unbreakable human will. In the years that followed, the story of the Little Skipper and 9 lives became known as one of the strangest and most miraculous events in aviation history. Engineers would later analyze how the 2 bombers had interlocked so precisely that they stayed airborne for several minutes, an alignment so unlikely that it bordered on impossible. Pilots called it divine intervention, others called it luck. But for the men who lived it, it was something deeper, a moment when humanity met fate head-on in the most extraordinary way. Glenn Rojohn rarely spoke of that day. When he did, he credited his survival entirely to his co-pilot. He said that without William Leek's strength and calm, they both would have perished. In his words, "I owe him my life." Both men returned home after the war, their friendship forged in the sky, their courage etched into history. Today, the story of that mission remains one of the most awe-inspiring episodes of World War II aviation, a moment when duty, fate, and sheer human spirit collided thousands of feet above the earth. The sky over Germany that day bore witness to both tragedy and triumph, destruction and survival. It was proof that even in the darkest moments of war, the human heart could still defy the impossible. And that is the legacy of the Little Skipper and 9 lives, 2 flying fortresses that became one, flown by men who refused to surrender and who showed the world that courage doesn't always mean victory. Sometimes, it simply means not giving up, even when the sky itself seems to fall apart. This incredible real-life story stands as one of the rarest events in aerial combat history, a symbol of bravery, sacrifice, and unshakable resolve. Their flight, their fall, and their survival remind us of the countless unsung heroes who took to the skies in defense of freedom. And that's why their story still matters, because courage like that never fades. You've been watching Max Knowledge USA. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that shaped our world, told the way history deserves to be heard.